Have you ever heard the whisper of a spirit on the road at night? I have, and not for the last time. I'm Thomas Whitaker, and this is the story of how I encountered something that wasn't supposed to exist. Something that haunts me to this day. Get ready for a journey down the A456, where the line between the real and the supernatural becomes dangerously blurred. And remember, not everything you see can be explained. Subscribe now, and don't miss any horror stories. Leave a like and share if you're ready to face the unknown. It was a night like any other. Or so I thought. I, Thomas Whitaker, was driving along the A456, a road I know like the back of my hand. I've worked as a lorry driver for more than a decade, and this route is part of my everyday life. But that night, something was different. The darkness seemed thicker, and the silence was almost deafening. The A456 is a lonely road, surrounded by dense forests and open fields. At night, it's as if the whole world disappears, leaving only you and the road. I've always felt a sense of unease passing through here, but I've never been able to pinpoint why. Perhaps it was the stories I heard as a child about a spirit that haunts this road. Stories of a woman dressed in white who appears to lonely travelers. As I drove, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. I looked in the rearview mirror, but there was nothing but the empty road. The wind was blowing hard, making the trees sway as if they were alive. That's when I saw her, a figure on the side of the road, almost invisible in the darkness. My heart raced. I slammed on the brakes, but when I looked again, she was gone. It was as if she had never been there. But I knew what I had seen. The image of that figure, shrouded in white, was etched in my mind. It was the same description I had heard in old stories. I took a deep breath and kept driving, trying to convince myself that it was just my imagination. But the uncomfortable feeling persisted. I needed to know more. I decided that the next time I was in town, I would go to the library to research the legend. Maybe there would be something to explain what I had seen. As I drove along the road, I couldn't stop thinking about the figure. It was as if it was calling me, drawing me into something I couldn't understand. The A456, which had always been just a route for me, now seemed like a way into the unknown. That night, I couldn't sleep. The images of the figure in the road haunted me. I needed to know more about the legend, to find out if there was any truth behind the stories. That's how I began my investigation, unaware that I was about to plunge into a world of mystery and terror. The next morning, I was determined to find out more about the figure I had seen. I drove to Bewdley Library, a small red brick building that looked like it had come out of a fairy tale. The librarian, a middle-aged woman with a kind smile, welcomed me and asked how she could help. I explained that I was interested in local stories, specifically about the A456. Her eyes widened for a moment, and she hesitated before directing me to a section at the back of the library. "You'll find some interesting things there," she said, with a note of caution in her voice. I started flicking through the old books and documents. Many of them talked about the history of the region, but it was a small leather-bound book that caught my eye. Entitled Legends and Mysteries of Worcestershire, it contained various stories about hauntings and unexplained events. It was there that I found the first mention of the lady in white of the A456. According to the book, the lady in white was the spirit of a woman who died in a tragic road accident over 100 years ago. She was trying to reach her family home when her horse was spooked by a storm, causing the carriage to overturn. The woman died by the side of the road, and ever since, her spirit has been seen by those travelling alone at night. As I read, I felt a shiver run down my spine. The description of the figure I had seen perfectly matched the one in the book. But what did it want? Why had she appeared to me? These questions plagued me as I continued my research. I decided to speak to some locals to see if they had similar stories. I met an old man in a pub in town who told me about his own experience with the lady in white. He said he saw her when he was young, and since then, he's never driven past the A456 at night. "You'd better watch out," he told me, with a serious look on his face. "She appears to those who are lost or who need help, but I don't know what happens next." His words stayed with me as I walked home. The feeling of unease I had felt on the road was even stronger now. I needed to know more, but at the same time, I was afraid of what I might discover. That night, as I lay in bed, I heard a strange noise outside. It was as if someone was whispering my name. I got up and looked out of the window, but saw nothing. The wind was blowing hard and the trees were swaying violently. It was then that I saw her again, the figure on the side of the road, illuminated by the dim light of the moon. My heart raced. I knew I had to find out what she wanted, even if it meant facing my greatest fears. The next morning, I was more determined than ever to solve the mystery of the lady in white. But the more I investigated, the more I realized that I was entering a world where the supernatural and the real intertwined in unexpected ways. The next few days were a mixture of frantic research and sleepless nights. Every piece of information I found about the lady in white seemed to lead me deeper and deeper into a labyrinth of mysteries. The library became my refuge, a place where I could immerse myself in the stories of the past and try to find some logic in the supernatural. One rainy afternoon, while leafing through an old local newspaper, I came across an article dated 1905. The headline read, "Tragedy on A456. Woman loses life in accident." The article described how a young woman called Eliza Harrington had died in a carriage accident on the same road I travelled every day. The coincidence was disturbing. The article mentioned that Eliza was on her way to visit her family when the storm hit. The carriage lost control, and she was thrown out, meeting her end at the side of the road. The community was in shock, and many claimed to have seen her spirit wandering around the area on the following nights. Intrigued, I decided to visit the local cemetery where Eliza was buried. The cemetery was a somber place, with old tombstones covered in moss and twisted trees that seemed to hold the secrets of the dead. I found Eliza's gravestone easily. It was weathered but still legible. As I stood there, I felt a presence beside me. I turned round, expecting to see someone, but there was no one. However, the feeling of not being alone persisted. Then I heard a whisper, so light it could have been the wind, but I knew it wasn't. "Help me," it said. My heart raced. I knew I had to find out what Eliza wanted, but how? I went back to the library, determined to find more information. I found a book on spiritualism and seances, which described methods of communicating with the dead. Although skeptical, I was desperate enough to try. That evening, I prepared a séance in my living room. I lit candles and sat in silence, waiting for some sign. At first, nothing happened, but then I felt a change in the air, a sheer, cold sensation that couldn't be explained. The flames of the candles flickered, and I heard the whisper again, clearer this time. "The road, it needs to be freed." The message was cryptic, but I knew I needed to get back to the A456. Something told me that the answer was there, waiting for me. With the message from the séance echoing in my mind, I prepared to get back on the road, but at the same time, I feared what I might find. The A456, which had always been just a route for me, now seemed like a portal to the unknown. The night was silent as I took to the road again. The A456 stretched out in front of me, a strip of tarmac winding through the darkness. The trees along the road seemed closer, as if they were approaching to observe my journey. I felt a mixture of fear and determination, knowing that I had to face whatever was waiting for me. As I drove, I began to notice strange signs. A thin mist came out of nowhere, covering the road and distorting my vision. The car's headlights seemed to struggle against the darkness, barely managing to illuminate the road ahead. It was then that I saw her again. The figure shrouded in white, standing in the middle of the road. I slammed on the brakes, my heart pounding in my chest. The figure didn't move. It was as if it was waiting for me. I got out of the car, feeling the cold night air penetrate my bones. Approaching slowly, I tried to catch her eye, but she remained motionless, a silent spectre in the night. "Who are you?" I asked, my voice trembling slightly. "What do you want from me?" The figure slowly turned round, and I could see its face for the first time. It was the face of a young woman, with eyes that seemed to contain centuries of sadness. She opened her mouth but made no sound. Instead, a vision appeared in my mind, an image of the road as it was more than a century ago. I saw Eliza Harrington's carriage, the raging storm around it. I saw the moment of the accident, the moment her life was taken. And then I saw something else. A man, a traveller who passed by that night. He saw the accident, but did nothing to help. Instead, he picked up something from the ground, an object that belonged to Eliza, and went on his way. The vision disappeared as quickly as it appeared, leaving me stunned. Eliza's figure was still there, but now I understood. She wasn't looking for revenge. She wanted justice. She wanted the truth about her death to be revealed. "I'll help," I promised, my voice firmer now. "I'll tell your story." The figure nodded slowly, and then, as if it had never been there, disappeared into the mist. I was left alone on the road, the silence of the night falling over me like a cloak. But I was no longer afraid. Instead, I felt a new determination. I had a mission: to tell Eliza's story and make sure her memory wasn't forgotten. I got back into the car, feeling lighter. The road was still the same, but I was no longer the same man who had travelled it. I had a purpose now, and that gave me the strength to keep going. With my promise to Eliza, I knew I had to act, but at the same time, I feared the consequences of getting involved in such an old mystery. The truth, as I was about to discover, could be more dangerous than the supernatural itself. The next morning brought with it a clarity I had not felt for days. With the promise to Eliza I knew I needed to act quickly. I went back to the library, determined to find any additional information that could help tell your story. It was then that I found an old newspaper article, hidden among the pages of a forgotten book. The article detailed the testimony of a man who claimed to have seen Eliza's accident. He described a traveller who briefly stopped at the scene, picked something up from the ground and left. The man could not see the traveller's face, but he described a brooch that he picked up, a brooch that belonged to Eliza. With this new information, I started to investigate further. I spoke to descendants of the Harrington family and found an old portrait of Eliza wearing the brooch. It was a unique, easily identifiable piece. With this evidence, I began to search for records of similar objects in the region. After weeks of searching, I finally found a clue. A local antique dealer had records of a similar brooch, sold by a traveller shortly after Eliza's accident. The name of the buyer was registered, a man who lived in the region at the time. With this information, I was able to locate his descendants, told them the story of Eliza, and showed them the evidence she had gathered. They were shocked, but agreed to help correct the mistake of the past. Together, we managed to locate the brooch, which had been passed down from generation to generation. It was a family piece, but now carried the weight of a dark secret. We decided to return the brooch to the cemetery where Eliza was buried. It was a moment of solemnity and reflection. As we were putting the brooch on the tombstone, I felt a presence by my side again. This time it was not a feeling of fear, but of peace. I thanked Eliza for trusting me and promised her story would be told. Knew that by doing this, I was helping to free your spirit from the road. The A456 would still be there, but now it would no longer be haunted by Eliza's sadness. With the story of Eliza revealed, I felt a new mission, to share these experiences with the world. I came home and started writing down everything that had happened. He wanted people to know that the supernatural is not only a matter of fear, but also of justice and redemption. And that's why I'm here, telling you this story. If you are watching this video, it is because somehow the story of Eliza touched you. Maybe you felt the same cold in your spine as I did. Or maybe you wondered about the mysteries that surround us. If you like this story and want to know more about the dark secrets that lurk on the roads, be sure to subscribe to our channel. Click the like button to show your support and share this video with anyone you think would like to hear this story. And please leave a comment telling what you think. Your interaction is what motivates us to keep exploring these mysteries and bringing more stories to you.